All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and warmly welcome back from the coffee break. My name is Astrid Huopalainen. I'm part of the Abogora curating committee, and I will be chairing this session as well. And it's my great honor and delight to warmly welcome you to the very first Agora of this year's Abo Agora. The Agora is entitled Martial Sounds and Silences. This assemblage performance is created and presented to us by Dr. Susanna Hast and Dr. Noora Kotilainen, and I'll introduce our performers and presenters. So Dr. Susanna Hast is a writer, researcher, and songwriter. She works as associate professor in artistic research at Uniarts Helsinki. She has also studied war experience, military training, capoeira, trauma, and also subtle resistance to violence. Dr. Noora Kotilainen is a historian and social scientist working as a senior research fellow at the University of Helsinki. She has published a lot on crisis, wars, violence, suffering, humanitarianism, militarism, migration, and photography. Warmly welcome to our presenters. The floor is yours, please.
War is loud, so loud it makes you lose your mind. We cannot avoid the violence of sound. Some sounds tonight might be repulsive or scary. We cannot make martial sounds audible or become attuned anew without some discomfort. Martial from the Century Dictionary. Pertaining to or characteristic of the god Mars, of or pertaining to war, of warlike character, military, warlike, soldierly, as a martial equipment or appearance, martial music, a martial nation, having reference to a state of war, or to a military organization connected with the army and navy, opposed to civil as martial law, a court martial, pertaining to or resembling the planet Mars, in old chemistry, having the properties of iron, a soldier, or military man. In studying something so sexualized, destructive, generative, secret, emotional, gendered, and mystified as the military, what could be more revealing than exploring the workings of militaries through its own tactics? We do not mean taking up a gun. We mean taking up a bodily practice, utilizing the body's conditioning, the expressiveness of the body, and the centrality of the body's performance in military training and rituals.
We often talk about images and pictures of war. We remember wars through visual images, but we rarely mention or think about the sounds and silences of war. Although sound is paramount in war, the reality of war and its horrors are extremely loud and vocal. This is known by everyone who has lived amongst war, soldiers and civilians, humans and non-human animals alike. What are the sounds of war? What does war sound like? I remember how my grandfather, a Finnish veteran of the Second World War, told me how he woke up on the front line in panic. It was completely silent. What had happened? He was so used to the constant shell fire and the absence of sound. The silence was a sign of danger. J.B. Presley, a writer who served in the First World War, once said, "The fear enters through the ear." The constant and terrible sound of the shell fire wounded soldiers. Sound deafens, it terrifies, it makes you lose your mind. Sound may traumatize. Post-traumatic stress syndrome was first called the shell shock. Post-traumatic stress syndrome was first associated with shell fire, the loud, terrifying sounds of war. The sounds that never left the soldiers, even when the war was over, the sounds never ended. War is ongoing now, as we speak, in Ukraine, in Palestine, in so many different places. Right now, sounds of war are made, heard, and reacted to. The pivotal existence of sound in war, its consequences, and its effective power is obvious for the ones who have experienced war firsthand. People in the war zones know and learn how to listen to the war, to act and react to the sounds of rockets and explosions.
Anna Politkovskaya wrote about a boy called Sharbudin who was escaping Grozny to Ingushetia in 1999. There was no safe exit, and the boy was among a group of people being shot at from helicopters as they were trying to leave the city. The boy said, "It's nice to be deaf. The deaf can't hear any of this, and so they're not afraid." A Palestinian man I once met in Jordan told me that as a child he learned to unconsciously count the bullets being fired all around. A peculiar, perhaps necessary skill. The fortunate ones who have not experienced war firsthand encounter such sounds of war and violence through media, movies, literature, music, and other arts and research. These sounds come to us mediated and distant, but still we approach them with curiosity. A feminist curiosity that asks, where are the other voices? And what are these other voices? Whose silences? And when? Where is silence? I am thinking about loudness in terms of martial violence and military violence, which is not only the loudness of the war machine. It's not the loudness of bombs and weapon systems of any kind. I'm thinking of the more subtle loudness, which is not subtle at all, but in comparison to actual sounds of war, it can be. It's the loudness of thought. It's the loudness of political thought, the hardness of political thought, political speech, your speech, my thought, my loud thoughts, the gestures of loudness, the loudness of money that goes through, that is distributed, stolen, collected, confiscated through the military-industrial complex. These are the first signs of destruction. So I think we can and we have to listen and pay attention to when the speech gets loud, when it becomes a matter of necessity, of absolute conviction, of certainty, of national identity. I think that loudness also can cause a kind of amnesia, distortion of time, and then distortion of speech, so that I personally don't want to say anything anymore. I just want to be quiet. I am at loss with words. Words fail me. So it's a way to silence other speech. Loud speech silences other speech. Loud thought, loud writing becomes the kind of noise that you just maybe don't want to engage anymore.
Sound has been used in warfare and weapons design to induce uncertainty, fear and panic, starting from war cries. Modern weapons have been designed to make sounds that fray the nerves of the enemy, soldiers and civilians alike. Psychological noise weapons that induce panic, paralysis, and horror. The Soviet Union's Stalin Ogle or Katyusha rocket launcher made a terrible wheezing sound and was so effective also because of the sound it made. The Second World War German fighter planes, U-Junkers 87 or Stukas, caused terror by the screaming sound it made when approaching. These are examples of the diabolic psychological noise weapons, the sounds of war.
Panssaritorjuntatikillä Valtelo.
Ei, se on tankki.
Enpä luu. Tuommoista tietystä tankkituskin.
Kyllä, ei se ole mahdotonta.
No Eppälä tuota soppii.
Soppii. Aina Eppälä soppii, mutta tankki se on siitä huolimatta. Kas, kun tulee marja. Niin kukkasta, että...
This is gun pornography, or women kill with kitchen knives. Mari Ruti writes, "The penis as a signifier of phallic power is a collective fetish, a magical totem pole that's meant to protect us from danger, including any and all enemies of the state." Konekivääri 7.62 KK PKM, in other words, kuularuisku. Konepistooli 2000. Ilmatorjunta konekivääri NSV Itikka, alun perin neuvostovalmisteinen. Granaattipistooli, rynnäkkökivääri RK 62M RK 95, pumppuhaulikko Remington 870. Gatling konekivääri sarjatuliase. Sisään sopii NATO-konekiväärin patruuna. Kertasinko. Telamiina, pohjamiina. 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 Telamiina. Kosketusmiinat. Kevyt granaatin heitin. Pohjamiina. Epäsuoraa tulta. Raskas granaatin heitin. Kantama 6 tai 8 kilometriä. Patria Oyn valmistamia. Suomen valtio omistaa siitä 50,1%. Toimitusjohtaja on Rautalinko. Taistelupanssarivaunu Leopard 2A6, Leopard 204. Tulenjohtopanssarivaunu, rynnäkköpanssarivaunu, ilmatorjuntaohjus, lyhyen kantaman ilmatorjuntakanuuna. FIM-92 Stinger. Ohjusvene PGG Tornio, kevyt ja ketterä. Päivityksenä Saabin toimittama uusi taistelunjohtojärjestelmä. Miinantorjunta-alus Made in Italy. Lockheed Martin F-35A Lightning II. Ja tietenkin Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, kanuuna, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina, Telamiina, pohjamiina.
Sallow fin. 8-inch cannon is 203 millimeters. This one is 155 millimeters. At finish bastard. I was aware that the cannon in the picture is not 203 millimeters when I uploaded the video, but at the time, I couldn't find any other suitable image. Besides, this song is the artillery march, so does it matter in the end so much? At era 4612, the artillery have specs, so let's honor them. Could you search that 203 millimeters? Thanks.
Something that will haunt you. Terminal things. Final decisions. Terminal things take place. There is no undo button, no retake. Right and wrong. Wrong to take life. Right to defend the fatherland. Hard to give an answer. When I have not been in that situation, depends on what you have actually done. If it is something that will haunt you. If you fail to act, and as a result end up losing half of your group, if you have taken the life of an innocent person. I hope I never encounter such a situation.
military object, invasion, operation enduring freedom, friendly fire, Operation New Dawn, collateral damage, capability, demilitarized zone, arms system, offensive nature, Operation Desert Shield, limited nuclear war, restraint, after us, it is silence. Defense capability, casualty assistance officer, deterrence, military chaplain, corporal damage. If you want peace, prepare for war. Defensive nature, strategy. Peace is our profession. Military humanitarian intervention. Responsibility to protect. Pacification. Warrior adventure quest. Humanitarian soldier. Sexual harassment and assault response and prevention program.
Some individuals probably feel that in some isolated cases, the treatment by their supervisors could have been different. When I go around the units and discuss with conscripts and the staff, I get this positive and good feeling. There haven't been rape or such. We have addressed all known cases. Luckily, our female parts are conscious and will report directly. Our female parts, 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 our female.
The use of human voice in military training and war is of paramount importance. A soldier speaks clearly, precisely, and powerfully, using audible and distinct voice and understandable general language.
There haven't been rape or such. We have addressed all known cases. Luckily, our female parts are conscious and will report directly. Our female parts.
Martial use of voice and manner of speaking are exceptional, something that we all recognize. The general impression might be that soldiers yell, often in unnecessary magnitude. Almost all of the Finnish cadets we interviewed this summer saw unnecessarily strong use of voice as ridiculous. A yelling soldier was often considered even as humorous, just like the officers yelling in old comedy series. But voice articulates power. It may be violent, a form of violence. It articulates martial hierarchy and military worldview. The less powerful are yelled at, intimidated, subjected to sometimes arbitrary power. Yet, soldiers who train and command other soldiers suffer from loss of voice. Shouting damages the vocal cords, sometimes resulting in loss of voice and vocal problems. Unnatural use of voice highlights masculine power and the martial hierarchy that harms also the soldiers themselves.
Mandrake, do you recall what Clemenceau once said about war?
No, I didn't think I knew that, no.
He said war was too important to be left to the generals. When he said that, 50 years ago, he might have been right. But today, war is too important to be left to politicians. They have neither the time, the training, nor the inclination for strategic thought.
War is silly and insane. Yet arguing for non-violence is seen as unrealistic, naive. The ridicule for speaking for non-violence silences the voices that oppose war and different forms of violence. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Silence is a sign of consent.
As Judith Butler points out in her book, The Force of Nonviolence, only a few people would say that they want to live in a world in which no one argues for nonviolence. Imagine a world in which no one argues for nonviolence.
Imagine a world in which arguing for non-violence would not be seen as unrealistic and naive. A world in which non-violence was taken seriously.
Non-violence is often seen as powerless, weak. But opposition to war and denunciation of violence, the fight against violence, may be forceful, even aggressive. Aggressive non-violence is indeed possible. As Butler and, for instance, Gandhi have reminded us, and what many powerful yet non-violent social movements have shown us.
The use of force is so often justified as self-defense. A war of self-defense is perceived as morally justified. Slava Ukraini.
Yet the question remains, who are entitled to self-defense? Who are entitled to defend themselves? Who are seen as worthy of protection and defense? Entitled to life? Who have the right to live? Not all lives are seen as grievable. Who and what sorts of lives are rendered defenseless, disarmed, disregarded, deprived of the right to defend themselves? Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
Author and activist Ava Homa has written, female writers in Iran have long been shamed for their transgressions. They have been labeled lunatics, been driven to suicide, forced into exile, jailed and killed. Vocal women are called salite and biaya, degrading terms reserved only for women.
Sans zendegi azadi.
Woman, life, freedom. During the First World War, in 1915, Sigmund Freud wrote that the war exposed that there are very many more cultural hypocrites than truly civilized men, and that in reality, our fellow citizens have not sunk so low as we have feared, because they never had risen so high as we believed. Freud further expressed the view that the war had exposed that even intellectuals of high status may resort to narrow-minded and illogical conclusions rooted in emotional resistance to logic when such a situation as that of war arises. For him, the decline of moral ethics during war was a shocking and disillusioning experience.
Hannah Arendt noted that when the Nazis seized power, many intellectuals became apathetic and ignorant. We believe academics should speak up, not silently consent to the rise of militarism, and certainly not turn into obedient and passive representatives of the nation state.
All sorts of violence and forms of war are inseparably entwined, and violence and oppression always stem from the same origin. Economic and colonial oppression, war and genocide are always justified by lofty declarations or necessity of our own survival.
As Françoise Berge writes in her book, A Feminist Theory of Violence, violence is consubstantial to racial capitalism. It is not something that comes afterwards, the act of some extreme groups. Ecosystem degradation is accelerated by capitalism, which intensifies pollution and waste, deforestation, land use, change and exploitation, and carbon-driven energy systems. Rape, land theft, genocide, massacres, assassinations, destruction of public services, processes of enslavement, creation of private militias, torture, censorship have always been the tools of colonialism and capitalism disguised as civilizing missions or humanitarian intervention.
The violence at Europe's borders demonstrates that violations are acceptable when racially coded. Borders serve as constant reminders of the expectations to Europe's declared commitment to liberal values of universal human rights and equality before the law. The routine and systematic production of premature death at the borders of Europe means that the liberal promise of rights that the European modernity has propagated is reserved for those belonging to what Frantz Fanon called the zone of being, while violently excluding the non-being other.
Deportation and denial of admittance or stay. If you do not get a residence permit, you have to leave Finland. If you have applied for a residence permit and received a negative decision on your application, you have to leave Finland. If you have appealed the decision, you are allowed to wait for the administrative court's decision in Finland.
May your brother stay strong when he is displaced beyond the borders of this state. May your sister stay strong when she is dislocated beyond the borders of this state.
May your brother stay strong when he is displaced beyond the borders of this state. May our sister stay strong when she is dislocated beyond the borders of this state. May they land safely at the hands of authorities and in the next
at the
country.
hands of authorities here
May you be protected
and in the next
against
country.
harm, brother.
May you be protected against harm, brother.
Sister.
May you be protected against haavoittuvaisista. Ollaan kaikki eri. Pray for the young man whose mind is broken, who was removed from F to K.
If you do not leave Finland, the police or the border guard will enforce the decision on denial of admittance or stay. In other words, they will remove you from the country.
Who was removed from F to K, from F to K, from F to K, and who is in need of medications and psychiatric care, who was robbed and beaten, who was denied treatment because of a tattoo taken in F. We pray for A. A.
Who was denied treatment because of a tattoo taken in F. We pray for A, who persists by escaping inside the country repeatedly.
If you do not get a residence permit, you have to leave Finland.
We pray for we pray and we pray for the young man who was and who is in need, who was denied. We pray for A who persists. We pray for the young man.
Thank you.